Coming in at number 10, we have Chris Griffin will be a serial killer. Why not start off with a heavy hitter? Now, there is an episode where Chris recreates a famous scene from Silence of the Lambs where Buffalo Bill is dancing in front of the mirror naked with a large scarf. For anyone who hasn't seen Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill is a serial killer who kidnaps young girls, puts them in a hole in the ground, makes them put lotion on their skin so he can later use it to make dresses. Yeah, it's pretty messed up, but it goes a little deeper than just a gag from the movie. Seth Green, who voices the character of Chris, actually based the voice on Buffalo Bill, so that could be how the gag originally got in the show. But how far are the writers willing to take this relation? Maybe on one episode we'll see into the character's futures, and we might see that Chris has a basement full of bodies.
Moving on at number 9, we have Homer the God. All throughout history, gods are often depicted as being magical beings. In Greek mythology, they were often described as being strong, brave, and wise. Other people have depicted them as having white wings and magical powers. Now, what if I told you that Homer himself may be a god? Yep, that's right. That'll teach you not to stereotype gods to look a certain way. So people think that Homer is a god for two main reasons. The first one being that Homer is invincible. No matter what happens to him, he will always live on. He can never be killed. In several episodes, Homer has gotten into situations that should have severely harmed him or killed him, but this never happens. He can bleed, his bones can break, but they will always heal. Now, the second piece of evidence is Homer's real age. It seems that he has been around longer than we realize. In multiple episodes, we see a lot of Homer lookalikes from back in the day. Like, we see a Homer lookalike with a beard present for the 10 Commandments. Maybe this is Homer himself and not just a lookalike, meaning he's been around for a very long time. Because he's God.
At number 8, we have The Feud Brought the End of the World. These two are always at each other's throats and want to kill one another no matter what the cost. Well, some people think that they eventually got their way. This is why they stopped making new episodes. I mean, the real answer is that the show was just finished its run and they didn't have to make any new content anymore. This kind of plays into the theory that the show had something to do with the Nazis or World War II. Some fans speculate that the show took the same course as the war. The conflict between these two eventually built to the point where there was a massive battle where one of them develops an atomic bomb to blow up the other person and ends up killing everyone around them.
Moving on at number 7, we have the slaves. So people believe that these trains are slaves. Every day they have to work their hardest to avoid death. They are constantly worrying that they will be deemed useless, because once they're considered useless, then they're sentenced to death. So they all have been instilled with this fear in order to make them work harder. These trains are literally overworked, and they always have to do as they're told. Sounds like slavery to me. They don't get a say in the matter. It's literally they work or they get killed. Moving on to number 6, we have Ben is Beast Boy from Teen Titans Go. Ah, man. Teen Titans Go. That was another really good cartoon. Well, people have noticed some similarities between Ben and Beast Boy. First off, they both have the same ability to transform into different creatures. And second, they both have shaggy hair. Then they both have green eyes and are primarily associated with the color green. So could it be that they're just one and the same? Maybe after years of Ben wearing the OMNITRIX, he actually evolved into a beast-like creature. Since humans have a shorter lifespan than aliens, the watch ended up mutating into him so he could live forever as a creature. Also, Beast Boy's parents got killed in a boating accident. Really? Boating accident? It was probably that Ben could live since he was transformed into Beast Boy while he watched all his friends and family die around him. I mean, the similarities are there, but I don't personally buy this one. But who do you think would win in a fight? Beast Boy or Ben 10? Comment down below.
Coming in at number 5, we have the whole show takes place in Peter's psychosis. Even for an animated show, Family Guy has some crazy things happen with zero explanation as to how all this stuff can happen to one family. I mean, they're all supposed to be normal humans, right? Well, some fans have theorized something that is very dark and twisted. Some people think the show is a sitcom with real-world consequences, and the reason that the show was originally canceled was because everyone on the show died in a terrible accident. everyone except for Peter. This was an accident that he caused, and the stress of killing all of his friends drove him insane. Now the show either takes place in his head, or it is actually the ramblings he's telling a psychiatrist every time he has to sit down with them in a mental institution. That would explain how the show has gotten so crazy over the years. It's all the ramblings of a madman.
Moving on at number 4, we have the immortal life. Ever notice that the residents of Springfield never get older? Seriously, Lisa Simpson has been 8 for like 80 years. Okay, that's an exaggeration, I know. But seriously, they never age. Now, don't be a negative Nelly and comment it's because it's just a TV show, it's a cartoon. Okay, that's no fun. Use your imagination. So, theory goes that the characters on The Simpsons never age, all thanks to Homer Simpson. And no, it's not because he found the fountain of youth. It's quite the opposite reason why. So, theory goes that Homer accidentally released some toxic chemicals at the power plant that, when mixed together, prevents people from aging. So, now they remain the age that they were when they got exposed to those chemicals. Which is why Grandpa Simpson is still alive at his very old age, and why no one seems to age around town.
At number 3 we have It's a Metaphor for Heroin. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the expression chasing the dragon, but it's in reference to the first time you ever get high from injecting heroin. It's apparently the most intense experience you can have on opioids. Some people who get addicted to heroin are always trying to chase down that first high, trying to bring back that feeling that blew them out of this world. Well, what is the show Tom and Jerry? It's a cat that so badly wants to catch a mouse, but he never can. No matter how hard he tries, no matter how close he gets, or how crazy of a mousetrap he builds, he never is able to get what he wants. Maybe this is true. Maybe the creator of the show was struggling with a drug addiction, and this was a problem he expressed through a kid's cartoon. Or it's just a cartoon and we're looking way too deep into this.
In our second spot, we have Sir Topham is in love with Thomas. You heard me correctly. The Fat Controller has a weird obsession with this train. So, people believe this theory for many reasons. So, in one of the episodes, Thomas gets lost on his way to the mainland. Everyone is searching for him, but Sir Topham is the most freaked out. He is so concerned that he has lost the love of his life. As a result, he gets angry at the other train, saying that they aren't looking for him hard enough. Now, when Thomas is found, Sir Topham throws off his hat and tries to hold back tears. He then says he can always get another hat, but he'll never have another Thomas. Pretty creepy. He also declared Thomas to be train number 1 because he is number 1 in his heart. How sweet. Or creepy. And in our number 1 spot, we have the OMNITRIX is a killer. That's right. This theory surrounds the idea that the OMNITRIX is in fact killing Ben. So let's look at the facts. Every time that Ben is turned into an alien, his DNA is merged with the aliens. In fact, an article written on Ben 10 states that the selected alien's DNA is merged with the wearer's DNA, transforming the user into the selected alien. Meaning, Ben's DNA is being damaged every time he transforms and reverses. So let's get scientific for a second. So every time a cell divides, the telomeres, which are located at the end of chromosomes, are said to get damaged and get shorter. If the telomeres get too short, then it will cause our cells to age and stop functioning properly. This could cause Ben to get really weak and sick, eventually dying as a result of transforming too many times. Starting off this countdown, we have the wealthy man. Anyone wonder how Homer has so much money? Like, he's got a big home, 2 pets, 3 kids, and can afford tons of food and booze to satisfy his needs. On top of that, we hardly see him working. He definitely does not work every day 9 to 5. And we know that Marge doesn't work. So how is it that he can afford this lifestyle? Well, it's theorized that Homer is still receiving royalties from the B Sharps. For those of you who don't know, back in the day, Homer was in a barbershop quartet called the B Sharps, with Barney, Apu, and Principal Skinner. Clearly, they made a lot of money on their hit album, and to this day, they are still receiving residuals from it.
And number 9, we have The Show is in Hell. What would hell be like? I mean, I understand it's supposed to be some sort of great suffering where we're tortured and beyond what we could possibly imagine. Well, what would be a worse torture than being a cat who can't even catch a mouse? You do whatever you can to catch this mouse, but it always slips through your fingers and you're and it's always able to outsmart you at every turn. Now, I'm not saying that the show takes place in a cat's hell, although if any animal could go to hell, it would be cats. They are just rude all the time. But what I am saying is that this is the eternal torture for some person. Basically, someone used to be a person, then they got turned into a cat in hell, because Tom and Jerry live in the worst version of Groundhog Day I've ever seen. Unless you're Jerry, then it's pretty bang on. There is also a big bad dog that chases Tom around, who is one of the only figures in the show that Tom is afraid of. This could be the representation of Cerberus, who is a three-headed dog and the guardian of the underworld in Greek mythology. Or maybe cats, mice, and dogs have just been at each other's throats for so long that this is the most logical step in creating new characters.
At number 8, we have the trains are humans. Yep, that's right. People have theorized that the trains were once real people. These people are now trapped inside the trains' bodies and can no longer control themselves. They can only move their eyes and they can't even speak on behalf of themselves. So how did these people become trains? Well, people believe that Sir Topham is an evil scientist that had a bunch of henchmen working for him. When these humans were no longer useful, he turned them into trains. And when they're no longer useful as trains, he kills them. Another theory is that there was an explosion at a nuclear power plant. As a result, all the workers turned into these weird gray blobs with everything being paralyzed but their eyes. Now, in order to preserve them, Sir Topham placed them on trains, and that's why the trains have gray faces. In our 7th spot, we have the OMNITRIX's simulation. So people believe that Ben's life is an entire simulation. To begin, they claim that during Ben's time on Earth, alien species came to inhabit it because their species were dying. They came to Earth to survive and create new colonies. Before humanity ended, the Philoticus biopsis, which are mosquito-looking creatures, collected a sample of Ben's DNA. When the end of the world hit, Ben's DNA was reanimated. So basically, Ben is not alive. He's just participating in a simulation of his old home. It also simulated other dimensions, which explains the series Ben 10 Omniverse. So yeah, we don't ever have to worry about Ben dying because he's not real. And he's a cartoon.
Coming in at number 6, we have Stewie is the clone of an evil genius. Now, who this genius is yet to be pinpointed. Some people think that it's a Nazi scientist from the past, and other people say that it's someone from the future that sent their DNA back in time so it could grow up to take over the world. But Stewie constantly has access to gadgets and weaponry that are far beyond anything that any normal person should have. I mean, he has tech more advanced than any of the world's militaries, things to phase through dimensions and travel through time. Also, he's been able to wage war against all of his enemies. Now, this character has been softened since the show originally launched. Remember back when he was always trying to kill Lois? But there's definitely signs that he has a super level intellect.
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with jaundice. Okay, maybe this one is a more realistic reason as to why Homer and the rest of the cast on The Simpsons are yellow. It's simply because they are jaundiced from having liver disease. Yep. That's right. Everyone suffers from liver disease, even newborn babies. Another version to this theory is that they have evolved over time and are no longer born with livers, and that's why they're yellow.
At number 4, we have Tom is on speed. Why is he going crazy all the time? Why can't he just chill out for 2 minutes? I get it that Jerry is a mouse, but I bet if you asked him to chill, he would probably be down to hang out. Like, peace and love, man. So the backbone of this theory is basically Tom's whole demeanor towards Jerry and the whole world, really. He is so reactive. He doesn't sit back for moments. He doesn't let anything just sink in. As soon as something triggers him, he's off and running, and usually this is how he ends up getting outsmarted by Jerry. Tom is also moving through the world at 1,000,000 miles per hour. He never slows down for anything. It's like he's constantly revved up or on some sort of substance. He's angry all the time, and aggression can be a side effect of speed or other amphetamine-like drugs. So maybe if we took this little tomcat to rehab, he would be a nice little kitty who wants to spend the rest of his time with his little mouse pal.
Moving on, at number 3, we have the murderer. So we've already established that Sir Topham, or as they call him, the Fat Controller, is out of his mind. And the Fat Controller is legit the name that they gave him. I didn't just make that up. They literally call him the Fat Controller. But people also theorize that he killed his child. So in one of the books, it is mentioned that Sir Topham has a son son named Charles, but we never get to see him. Then in the episode called Tickled Pink, we see Hat's granddaughter, but not her parents. His granddaughter is having a birthday celebration, so it's weird that her parents aren't present. So people are convinced that Topham ended up killing his son one day out of a fit of rage. Maybe because he knocked up his girlfriend too young, who knows. Then later on we are introduced to a train named Charlie. And that's when people theorize that he killed his son and put his soul in a train. In fact, in one of the episodes, Charlie is shown to steal the Fat Controller's car. Hello, that happens in like every teenage movie. A rebellious son is mad at his parents and steals his car. So yeah, he's mad at his dad for literally killing him and making him trapped in a train. In our second spot, we have Ben 10 is a metaphor. This next theory states that the entire Ben 10 show is just a big metaphor for growing up. So let's examine this in depth. You have Ben, a little 10-year-old, who learns how to mature and be responsible through the aliens he transforms into. Aliens are thought to symbolize puberty. Just like how when kids hit puberty, they're overwhelmed with different emotions and different experiences. Because of these aliens, he becomes stronger, faster, and mentally tougher, all which can happen during puberty. Now, each alien is said to teach him different things. Echo Echo is his changing voice. Humongousaur is his growth spurts. Chromastone is supposed to symbolize acne since he's covered in red type crystals, and Stinkfly is his body odor. Those are just some of them. Then the villains represent the struggles you face when growing up. Like Dr. Nemo, which is said to represent Ben's fear of doctors, and Charmcaster, which symbolizes the mean cool girl in school that may bully Ben. So there you have it. The whole series is just about Ben developing and going through puberty.
Coming in at number 1, we have Family Guy was created through an act of God. This is one of the craziest theories about Family Guy that I can find, and that is why it has the sweet number 1 spot. I don't know if you guys know this about Family Guy, but the creator of the show, Seth MacFarlane, was supposed to be on one of the flights that ended up crashing into the World Trade Center. The reason he missed the flight is because he was so hungover that he didn't make it to the airport in time. Talk about lucky. It's crazy to think that a certain chain of events led down to that moment, and Seth must have felt like the luckiest person in the world. But some people don't think it was luck. They think that it was God's plan. Shout out to Drake. God made sure Seth would live so he could make Family Guy. People even go as deep to say that there are hidden messages from the big man upstairs in the show. And if you watch the show closely, you'll see that there are more than just fart jokes, but the word of God himself coming through Seth MacFarlane. So if you want God to save your life, you just gotta write a really good spec script. At number 10, we have Tom and Jerry as Nazi propaganda. Some of you might think this theory is a little forced, but there's actually a lot of evidence. Now, the show is obviously about a never-ending battle of a cat and mouse, but what is the common outcome of these encounters? Well, they usually end with Jerry outsmarting Tom, even though he's a little mouse and he has to get away from a big scary cat. But the names Tom and Jerry could be referenced to the British military troops, which were referred to as Tommies, and the Germans, which were referred to as Jerrys. The reason that Jerry is always able to outwit Tom is because the secret message in the show is that the Germans are smarter than the Brits. And to add a little bit more fuel to the fire, the show came out in 1940, so there's a good chance that the creators knew all about this army slang. Perhaps the show has been spewing Nazi propaganda this whole time.
Coming in at number 9, we have the psychiatric hospital child. Now, people have a theory that Thomas the Tank Engine is literally just a child playing with his train set. I mean, this would explain why there's only one voice for all of the characters, and often it's in third person. It's the child explaining the story. It also explains why the trains talk but don't move their faces, just their eyes. This is also why the human characters remain motionless. So people think that this child is locked in a psychiatric hospital, and the only toys he plays with are these ones. The child has a very sadistic mind and tortures these trains. In fact, the child imagines himself as Sir Topham, the controller of the trains. He then lashes out at the trains, often destroying them. The hospital is trying to get the boy to control his dark thoughts through play, but he can't, so he always ends up killing the trains. Moving on at number 8, we have the accident. Alright, so in the first episode, Ben makes a wish on a shooting star, wishing that he won't have a boring summer. From there, the shooting star appears to be an alien pod that contains the OMNITRIX. Well, this theory believes that Ben was actually hit by something that fell from the sky, which knocked him unconscious. But don't worry, this isn't another "they were all in a coma" theory, it's not. So when Ben woke up, he was badly injured, so he stayed inside the van the rest of the trip and just used his imagination to make his summer less boring. So here's some evidence to support this. In the show, when the object makes contact with the ground, it's super loud and bright. Why didn't Max or Gwen hear this? That's because it didn't happen. Then throughout the series, it's shown that Ben is a fan of comics and video games. In fact, the first character that he turns into is Headblast. Doesn't Headblast's face kind of resemble Iron Man's mask? And he can shoot flames out of his hands. Iron Man shoots lasers from his hands. So maybe he just imagines himself as other characters from his favorite comics. And lastly, the series starts with Ben being 10 years old. At that age, kids tend to have an attachment to their electronic devices, and they rather stay in and watch TV and game all day than get some fresh air. So Ben compromises by imagining all this video game stuff is happening.
Coming in at number 7, we have There Is a Family Guy Multiverse. There is no denying that Family Guy has some of the craziest plot lines on TV, unless you're counting shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force, where 3 of the main characters are living food products. But how do they all do all of these wild things, and how do they happen all to the same family? Well, there's a theory that many of these episodes take place in different universes, thus giving the show the possibility for anything to happen at any time, because all realities are flowing simultaneously. Going along with this theory, some people think that the universe the show took place in before the show was cancelled was destroyed. That is why so much of the show has changed. Everything in the previous existence got erased.
Moving on to number 6, we have the Time Traveler. Do not underestimate Homer Simpson. He is way smarter than he appears to be. After I just finished talking that he has brain damage, and it's because he has figured out how to time travel, and he's been doing it for years. This theory can be used to explain why the show has so many inconsistencies. It's because Homer is going back in time and altering the show's history and timeline. That's why some tragic incidents that occur in one episode are completely forgotten and never mentioned again in future episodes. This can also be used to explain why there are Homer lookalikes back in the day. It's because it's actually Homer who has been caught time traveling. Side note, I did a video on top 10 time travelers caught throughout history, so go check that out if you haven't already. But if I do another part to this series, then I should totally add Homer Simpson on the list.
Number 5, we have Jerry Gets Caught. With any show like this, you wonder what would happen if the underdog finally won. What would happen if Tom actually caught Jerry? Well, apparently the cartoonist for the show made an episode where this does happen. However, they did this while no one was looking and made the episode very gruesome. Legend says that someone found it, fired the cartoonist, and then took possession of the work, and this episode is now in an unknown location. If this is true, this piece would possibly be worth millions of dollars.
In our 4th spot, we have the evil conductors. Now, each train is said to be able to move only when they have a train conductor on board. This was proven in one episode where a train was whipping along fast on the tracks. He couldn't stop himself because he had no conductor. Now, the trains are also shown to do some dark things to other trains. Does that mean that the conductors have complete control over the trains and their emotions? Well, yeah, that's what some people believe. So, in one episode, the trains are at a scrapyard when they decide to bully another train. They're literally scaring him and pushing him and threatening him that he is going to be scrapped. That means that the conductors were all behind this and wanted to torment that poor train. Then in another episode, the trains create and execute a plan to basically rip a train in half to teach him a lesson. Why are these conductors so sinister? They're literally forcing the trains to harm each other for their own amusement. Moving on to number 3, we have Ben is Violent. So turns out Ben might be the biggest threat of them all. So the OMNITRIX is said to be a tool to teach Ben about different species. In fact, it is said that its main purpose was to teach others about alien life and species and not to be used as a crime-fighting tool. But Ben, instead of using it for educational purposes, uses it to destroy other aliens. Now, what if these aliens weren't even a threat to Earth? They were just lashing out because they knew Ben was going to use this watch for bad. So Ben uses the OMNITRIX to fight crime instead of its main importance, which was bridging the understanding between humans and aliens so we can coexist in peace. But no, Ben decides to use it for combat, aka he's a super violent killer.
At number 2, we have The Chicken is Death. Now I know that Death has shown up on the show before and has hung out with Peter and the other members of his family, but some people think that the representation of Death that we have seen on the show isn't actually Death. It's some sort of godly figure that is extremely powerful, but whenever it shows up, it teaches Peter a lesson. It doesn't really take him to the afterlife. The Chicken, on the other hand, has worked very hard to try and kill Peter, but Peter seems to be unkillable. That is why the Chicken wants him so bad. Death wants the one soul that will not give itself up to him. If he can get Peter's soul, then he will be able to take the rest of Quahog.
And in our number 1 spot, we have the Simpsons world. Okay, this honestly has to be my favorite theory out there. But basically, it's said that Homer Simpson and his family are all part of a television show. Okay, yes, clearly they are. But this television show is one inside of the show Futurama. So basically, the characters of Futurama created the world of this show. It's a show inside a show. Okay, so let's look at the evidence. In season 1 of Futurama, tons of Simpsons merchandise can be seen in the background of the show, such as Bart Simpson dolls and other Simpsons toys. And in one episode, there was even footage from an old Simpsons episode playing on a screen. Not only that, but Matt Groening makes an appearance in Futurama as a jarred head at Comic-Con. So it could be that The Simpsons was a show created by Matt Groening, who is a cartoonist in Futurama. Amazing. Starting off this countdown, we have the tortured trains. Now, this isn't so much a theory as it actually happens in the show. So basically, if these trains are deemed unworthy or are no longer useful, then they end up being scrapped or dismantled, aka they're killed. Throughout numerous episodes, you even see this happen. There was one episode where they literally pulled the train apart into pieces. They hooked him up to another train and that train kept going until they ripped him in half. Like, how messed up is that? Or you have a train that was turned into a generator and his corpse was stuck behind a shed. There he just lives motionless for the rest of his life. The trains are terrified of this or worse things happening to them, and they live in constant fear. In one episode, you have the train named Hyro. Hyro is shown living and hiding out in the woods since he is terrified that he is too old and will be deemed useless and then murdered. Or how about the episode where the manager of the railway totally harassed the train James? He painted him pink so that people would just laugh and make fun of him. As a result, James was humiliated and spent the whole episode hiding in a tunnel. How messed up is that?
Coming in at number 9, we have Brian is a god. Now, not like a real god. You don't go to church every Sunday to pray to an animated dog, but that he is the god of the Family Guy universe. There are a couple of things that point towards this. Brian is a dog, but he lives life as a human. I mean, sure, he does do some things that dogs do, but he also drinks, parties, dates, falls in and out of love, and everything else that every other human character on the show can do. On top of this, he's voiced by the creator of the show, Seth MacFarlane, and Seth uses his natural speaking voice to talk as Brian. So the idea of Brian being the god of the Family Guy universe is that Seth is projecting himself into the show and living through the character. So Brian and Seth are one in the same. I mean, if you can't live out your dreams in the regular world, then just create an animated world and have at it. Although I don't know what else Seth MacFarlane could possibly want out of this world.
Coming in at number 8, we have the reincarnation. So, like I mentioned before, there seems to be a lot of Homer lookalikes. Whenever there are flashbacks or pictures from the past, we can see people that look just like Homer. Theory goes that every time Homer dies, he is reincarnated into another version of himself, meaning Homer has been alive for a long time. So it seems that Homer is a god similar to the ones in Buddhism, giving him the power of reincarnation.
At number 7, we have the science experiment. So how are these two so smart? They are able to navigate the whole world, use tools, and even come up with complex plans even though they're just a cat and mouse. Well, some people think that it's all part of an experiment gone wrong. The idea is that Tom used to be a person. He was a scientist that was constantly using the same mouse for experiments. He wanted to see how far he could increase the intelligence of this mouse. Eventually, he was very successful and he made a mouse with genius level intellect. The mouse was actually so smart that it was able to knock out the human version of Tom and then implant his brain into a cat's body. This is how the two of them are so smart, but why Jerry is a little bit smarter, and why the two are constantly trying to kill each other at the drop of a hat. They don't need any motivation because there is a long-standing hate between the two of them.
have the apocalypse. So this theory believes that this show takes place in a post-apocalyptic train depot. So apparently this area is the only safe zone out there. In fact, in one of the Thomas books, it reads, "Engines on the other railway aren't safe now. Their controllers are cruel. They don't like engines anymore. They put them on cold, damp sidings and then they cut them up." How mortifying is that? And how is that even in a children's book? Now, this town still treats the trains pretty poorly. So it makes me wonder, if we think that this is bad, then how worse is it outside of town? We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the death of Ben. So this theory is just quite random, but it's still dark. So in season 1, episode 7, Ben, Max, and Gwen go to New York. While checking into their hotel, Ben sees that there is a new sumo slammer game being tested in the hotel, but the entrance is being blocked by this big bodyguard. Ben ends up turning into Ghost Freak to sneak inside and play the game. That's when the guard catches him. Ben's final words are, "Uh-oh, game over." Then the screen cuts to black. Well, people theorize that Ben didn't just get kicked out of the hotel, that something more sinister happened. So they believe that the guard in fact assaulted Ben or beat him up until he was knocked unconscious. I mean, the dude is pretty big and tough looking, so it could be possible.
Coming in at number 4, we have the same dinner theory. I don't know if you guys have realized this, but the Griffin family sits down to eat the same food every night. Go through and watch a bunch of episodes of Family Guy. Every time it's dinner, they eat the same 3 things: mashed potatoes, some roast beef, and what looks like a pile of peas. No wonder Peter Griffin can never lose weight. He needs to mix in some healthy fats and cut out all of those potatoes. So who in their right mind would choose to eat the same thing every night, day in and day out? Well, that is because they have been forced to act out the show because they are prisoners. The whole show takes place in a basement on a set that someone constructed. He kidnapped a family to make them act out a sitcom in his home. It was some script that no one would buy. So the reason that they eat the same food every night is because they have no other choice. Also, we clearly know that someone would buy this script. It's one of the most successful shows that has ever been made.
In our 3rd spot, we have the swear words. So, The Simpsons don't really swear in the show. Sure, they allude to swear words, but the characters don't actually curse. Or do they? Well, turns out that the meaning of Homer's dope is worse than we thought. Yes, I have to go like 3 octaves lower just to get that. Theory goes that in the Simpsons dictionary, dough is basically a substitute for the F word. So Homer has quite the potty mouth. This means that he swears around his kids all the time. Poor baby Maggie, I'm surprised that that wasn't her first word.
At number 2, we have Jerry is the evil one. Throughout the show, it always seems like Tom is the big bad cat and Jerry is the little cunning mouse who's able to outsmart his larger adversary. But when you sit down and actually watch the show, it's Tom usually just trying to live his life. He will be either teaching a little cat how to be a cat or trying to seduce some lovely lady cat, but then he'll do something that inconveniences Jerry, and instead of Jerry just coming out to talk with him and deal with the problem, he drops an anvil on his head. Like, dude, talk about overreacting. You need to chill out a little bit and talk about your problems. On several occasions, it's Jerry who instigates the conflict, and if he was actually a sweet little mouse who was constantly at a disadvantage, then why would he always be trying to start problems? I think Tom might be the peaceful one and he just wants to be left alone.
And in our number 1 spot, we have the insane tyrant. So the Fat Controller is the manager of the Northwestern Railway and is officially out of control. He is so manipulative and endlessly tortures and enslaves the trains. That's because he is slowly seeping deeper into madness and losing his mind. Let me explain. So Sir Topham Hatt has given the trains very cruel punishments. For example, there was an episode where it was raining and Henry the train didn't want to ruin his paint, so he stayed inside a tunnel. Now, the Fat Controller didn't like this and wanted to get Henry out. When all of his attempts to get Henry out of the tunnel failed, he decided to punish him by bricking him in the tunnel. That's right. He built a brick wall so Henry wouldn't be able to escape the tunnel and he would have to live in there alone in the dark for the rest of his life. What kind of messed up punishment is that? Like, he even said, "We shall take away your rails and leave you here for always and always." He ended by saying, "I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you?" Like, he has no chill. Also, he likes to see the trains struggle. He often withholds useful information from the trains, resulting in them having conflicts that they need to solve themselves. These could have been avoided if he literally told the trains, but no, he'd rather see them suffer. And that's all for today. Starting off this countdown, we have the shape-shifting alien. With the power of the Omnitrix, Ben can transform himself into numerous aliens. Some of his notable alien transformations include Diamond Head, Stinkfly, and Shockrock. But people theorize that Ben in fact was always alien and never a human. So the theory goes that because of the ongoing war between aliens in space, Ben was sent down to Earth with his alien family. If they have power to transform into different aliens, then they also have the power to hide out in a human body. So they transformed into humans and then came to Earth. When Ben found the Omnitrix, it latched onto him because he's an alien. He was the closest thing in range, so it latched onto him. However, if it was an actual human, then it wouldn't have done anything or even worked. Because why would humans be able to use alien technology? So Ben and his family are aliens. To prove this, in Ben 10 Alien Force, it is revealed that Gwen's powers and abilities are from alien descent from her grandmother, Verdona. Like, hello, their grandmother is an alien, and so she gave birth to other aliens.
Coming in at number 8, Peter and Lois will get divorced. The fat guy married to an attractive lady is a classic theme that many sitcoms, animated or otherwise, have used again and again, and in all these shows the talk of divorce comes up so many times it's usually just a running joke that never gets realized. But many of the fans have speculated that Family Guy might be the first show to do it and stick with it. The theory is that they might have a spin-off series starring Lois. It would be a dramatic change for the show, but they have experimented with spin-off shows before. We had the Cleveland show that took Cleveland back to his hometown to raise a family, and American Dad isn't really a spin-off, but the two shows reference each other quite a bit. Having a female lead would be a change, and the spin-off format that they've been trying might be a huge hit.
Making our way down the list, number 7, we have the Conditions. Ever wondered why the Simpson characters are yellow? Well, get ready because this next theory is pretty wild. So, theory goes that Homer actually suffers from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and he tried to end his life. But this was a failed attempt that sadly left him with brain damage. Now he suffers from hallucinations where he imagines that everyone in his town is yellow. On top of that, this is why Homer isn't the brightest. He was actually a pretty clever man, but sadly is no longer due to the brain damage.
At number 6, we have Failure Runs in the Family. Is there a Warner Bros. Entertainment universe? If there is, this theory could be true. The idea is that Tom from Tom and Jerry and Sylvester from Looney Tunes are part of the same family. They both do the same thing. They're both cats that are trying to chase down something that they can never get their hands on. It's this one little animal that always escapes them, always outsmarts them, and perhaps they always go back to the same family reunion and have discussions about how depressed and unsuccessful they are at catching these little critters.
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Thomas's PTSD. So Thomas is probably the most well-known train out there. He's even described as being the cheeky one. But turns out that Thomas actually suffers from PTSD. So let me give you the theorized background on Thomas. Thomas was built in 1915 during World War I. That means he would have gone through intense labor during this time. Then later on you have the Great Depression, when railways were at their peak in the UK. Again, Thomas was overworked. Then you have World War II, in which he saw his friends being blown up from bombs. Thomas has been through and witnessed a lot. All of these factors has caused him to become traumatized. As a result, he has regressed and gone back to his childlike state. This is where he feels the safest. But it causes him to constantly act like a child and he doesn't know how to stand up for himself. Poor Thomas. Making our way down the list, at number 4 we have the Omnitrix is alive. The Omnitrix that is on Ben's wrist is alive and evil. Well, at least that's what people think. They believe that the watch is alive and chooses what creature he turns into. That's why in some of the episodes, Ben clicks on one monster but gets turned into another, which is not helpful in the current situation. This was done maliciously by the watch to try and kill Ben. For example, in one episode, Ben is turned into Ripjaws in the middle of the desert. Ripjaws is an aquatic type creature. Clearly the desert isn't the place for him. So how did the Omnitrix become alive? Well, with all the DNA that it gathers, chances are it could have mutated and obtained its own identity. Ben is a hero doesn't mean that the watch is.
Coming in at number 3, we have Joe Swanson Can Walk. Joe Swanson is the wheelchair-bound neighbor to the Griffins, and he is probably the most active person on the show. He's super fit, he works as a cop, and some fans have speculated that it's all a trick, that he's been able to walk this whole time, and the cop in a wheelchair thing is just an act. Joe secretly works for the CIA and has been stationed to be Peter and Lois's neighbor, so he can keep an eye on all the crazy things that they're doing all the time. It's his job to try and find out how they have insane amounts of money to spend on anything they wish, how they have connections all over the world, and how they can never die no matter how crazy of an accident they get into. Really, the whole Griffin family seems like gods just experiencing human life for fun.
In our second spot, we have the radiation. Homer has screwed up again. So, ever wonder why some Simpsons characters have actual hair like Homer, Apu, Moe, and Barney? But then other people have super weird hair, like Bart and Lisa. Well, you can blame Homer for that. While working at the power plant, he caused an explosion that mutated a bunch of people, like Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. The radiation caused their heads to become deformed and all pointy looking. So, in reality, their heads used to be normal with normal hair. But thanks to their father, they now have to suffer with weirdly shaped pointy heads.
And for the number 1 spot, we have Blue Cat Blues. This is probably the most famous conspiracy theory when it comes to Tom and Jerry. There's an episode of the famous show that is titled Blue Cat Blues. It opens with Tom sitting on train tracks and a narrator saying, "In a few minutes, it will all be over." And Tom looks terrible. He has huge bags under his eyes, he has stubble all over his face, and he is the saddest we have ever seen him. It then cuts to a flashback and we get to see what has turned Tom into this sad sack. We see that he just had his heart broken by this lady cat. He did everything in his power to try and woo her, but she decided to take off with another. So Jerry comes in to comfort him. And then we see a flashback about Jerry's love life, and we see how she left him for another mouse. So the two of them are now depressed, sitting on train tracks waiting for the train to come in. Obviously, we don't see them die, but many fans say this is where the show ends, that the two died that day taking their own lives on those train tracks.